Hey everybody, welcome to Academy on Air. My name is Dane Seiden. I am the Global Mobile Lead for small businesses here at Google, focused exclusively on making mobile sites better, which means that I eat, sleep, and breathe mobile speed, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Before I get started, over the course of this presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit anything that comes to mind when you're talking about mobile sites, from what is an accelerated mobile page to how do I style my hair this way. So whatever questions you have, please feel free to add them in and I'll try to answer them at the end. So let's kick off. First, let's talk about why mobile is so important these days and why it seems like everybody's talking about it. Recently, we found that the majority of searches were done on mobile phones instead of desktop for the first time ever, which means that more and more customers are spending time in the mobile experience. This means that as a developer, we need to worry not only about desktop, but thinking specifically about how customers are being reached through the mobile experience. A beautiful site on desktop is going to be incredibly important, as is one on mobile. But we need to make sure that we are specifically catering these experiences to all the people who are now seeing us on mobile for the first time. And one of the key things that we want to pay attention to is mobile site speed. Both as advertisers and consumers, we understand the fact that if a page is taking a really long time to load, we get frustrated, we have a worse experience, and it's something that we need to be optimizing for. But not only is actual speed very important, the perception of speed is very important. We know that we live in a world where we expect results immediately, and the browsing on content on mobile is no different. This means that it's not enough to be competing against other people who are in the advertising space for, okay, do I have a faster load time than so-and-so? We need to make sure that users perceive that we have a fast enough speed and that we are getting the content as soon as we want it. So we have done a little bit of research around mobile site load times. We've analyzed nearly 1 million websites, mobile landing pages, to understand how quickly consumers can get from that want, searching in their phone, and ultimately get to the results. And what we found is that 70% of mobile websites have a load time, a speed index, of over 7 seconds, and way over a megabyte. That sounds okay. That's 7 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but customers think of it as waiting for an eternity. In fact, we found that 53% of users are going to bounce and leave a website if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. So this is the delta, and this is the problem that we're going to try to address. I'm going to go into a whole bunch of tactics that we can use to help slim down our sites. But first thing first, we have to acknowledge the problem. And the problem is that our websites are way too slow. So let's start with sort of benchmarking. The average load time is 5.6 seconds on a 4G network. Now you may have noticed, looking at 4G speeds, looking at 3G speeds, they're both important. A lot of customers are going to see your site in ideal conditions, so on Wi-Fi or on 4G, but we want to make sure that we're not leaving any of our customers behind. We've all been in cases where we can't get any better than a 3G network, so we want to make sure that they have a good experience too. Now, again, recognizing this 5.6 number, we want to tie that back to the fact that 53% of customers are going to leave after 3 seconds, which means that even on the best network connections, we still have work to do. So Google has taken a whole lot of interest in this topic area, in making sure that websites are fast enough and that customers are getting the experiences that they've come to expect. As a result, the search team at Google has recently announced that it is going to start taking into account web page load time as it is displaying search results, which means that if you have a terribly, terribly slow site, even if you're exactly what the customer is looking for or you think you are, you may get dinged in search results. Additionally, even last week at the Mobile World Congress, there was an announcement made that the ads team is going to start taking into account mobile site speed when looking at the ads quality score. This is all meant not to scare you, but instead to demonstrate the fact that this is something Google's paying attention for. And as you're talking to your end customers, it's a data point that you can bring up to say, not only are faster sites going to benefit your customers, it's going to help you perform better in the web search and ads ecosystem. So let's get back to some hard truths. And one of these hard truths is the fact that on this webcast, about roughly the average load time is about 10 seconds on a 3G network. This is an eternity for an advertiser. There was a study done that suggested that that customers are delighted and thrilled when a website takes less than 3 seconds to load. When we get into that 4, 5, 6 range, customers start to think, okay, I'm a little frustrated, but whatever, I'm willing to deal with it. And once we get above that, you need to have really good content, and the customer needs to be very excited about what they're about to see to put up with it. Again, I want to put this 10-second number into context. This is a real problem. Customers view it as a real problem, and we need to prioritize it as such. So let's talk a little bit about how bad of a feeling this is. I love being able to tell advertisers exactly how frustrated customers get. And we have some fun stats here, but one of my favorites is the fact that 38% of people have either screamed at, cursed at, or thrown their cell phone because they were so frustrated that mobile content wasn't loading. I'm a little ashamed to say that I count myself among those, but it really indicates the fact that this is something that if you are a consumer of mobile content, as we all are, it matters. It matters getting that experience quickly as we're looking for it and almost instantaneously. I like the fact that end customers need to think about people getting as tense and as frustrated as watching a horror movie when they are experiencing slow load times. Again, this is something that is totally within our control. We have the power to give our end customers a good, an exciting and exhilarating mobile experience. And with a couple of steps, we're gonna be able to fix this. So again, I mentioned this 53% stat, the fact that 53% of customers are going to abandon a site if it takes over 3 seconds to load. As advertisers, we are spending a whole bunch of time trying to get end customers to our site. We spend tons of time trying to optimize our campaigns, making sure we're doing targeting correctly, but we need to start thinking about our websites as an extension of these ad campaigns. If you are dropping a customer off to a less than great mobile site experience, then the campaign hasn't done its job. Ultimately, everything that we're doing in AdWords is trying to get people to act and to convert based on these mobile websites, which means that we need to spend as much time thinking about where we drop customers off into our web experience as we do the campaigns that get them there. And again, customers have expectations. They want to make sure that they are spending their time well, and if they are frustrated with the website experience that they are getting, over a quarter of them are going to go to a competitor. And if we're talking about customers on their first time experience on a website, 1 in 5 of them aren't going to come back, which means that we need to make sure that that first experience is flawless and meets the customer expectations. So it is my job as a mobile advocate and our collective job as partners and as individuals trying to influence end advertisers to make sure that we can get these advertisers through what I call the 5 mobile stages of grief. It takes a long time to get past that first one. There is a whole lot of denial that happens that, hey, my website isn't that slow. I loaded it the other day from my phone in my office and I had a great experience, so I don't know what you're talking about. And what we find is that a lot of times when advertisers are checking their own site, they're not using realistic conditions. So for example, they've likely been to their site before, which means that a lot of the content is cached, meaning that you are going to experience faster load times than you might otherwise if you're experiencing the site for the first time. And if you remember, I just mentioned the fact that 1 in 5 customers, if they don't have a good experience the first time, aren't coming back. And this means that we need to optimize for the very first time that somebody comes to our mobile site, are they going to have a great experience? Once we get past denial, it's easy to slip into anger, the fact that things aren't working the way I'm supposed to, things are tough, but ultimately we are here to be able to equip you with the tools to be able to have these conversations and impress upon advertisers that, you know what, this is a challenge, but it is a manageable challenge, and we think that we can get you to a better web experience if you follow these steps. We're going to get to those in a couple of minutes. So let's talk a little bit about reasons why sites tend to be slow. Sites do not generally start off slow. Most of the time, as we are developing sites, we don't necessarily keep in mind that some of the choices we're making as we're designing and building the sites are going to wind up slowing these sites down. So I just want to run through a couple of our most wanted, our sort of biggest culprits as it comes to making websites slow. So first, and this is the one I see the most often, are images. So images make up 63% of total page weight. Page weight, how many megabytes it is taking to load the page. Images are most often the thing that can be optimized for first, fastest, and may have the greatest effect. So I like to remind people that we want to have a different mobile set of images than we do desktop. In desktop, you can have these big, beautiful, expansive images that require a lot of page weight, and it's not as big a deal. However, on mobile, the same page weight that is coming from these images isn't doing any work, because in order to get the full effect, customers need to pinch and zoom, and frankly, they're not going to do that, which means that it is a lot of page weight for not a lot of payoff. This means that optimizing images using the right format, the right size, and compressing them and making sure that we do this on a fairly consistent basis is going to have a substantial impact on the amount of time it takes for a mobile website to load. Second, I want to talk about resource requests. So every time that you put in a request, that is something that needs to be fetched from your server and then delivered back to the person who is browsing your website. And each one of these back and forths takes time, and it ensures that the page load time is going to increase. Here we see 20% of pages have over 100 of these requests going back and forth. There are many of these requests that are very necessary, but I want for people to keep in mind the fact that not all of them may be super crucial, particularly as we recognize that these tend to increase load time. So what we recommend is we try to optimize our servers, we try to use browser caching, and limit the number of resource requests that we require as we are having customers load our mobile site. Additionally, people are using JavaScript way more, and that makes a lot of sense. JavaScript can deliver amazing experiences, but we want to use it sparingly through our conversion funnel. We want to make sure that we are prioritizing the times when we need to use JavaScript against the potential implications that JavaScript tends to make load time longer. So a solution here is to make sure that you think through carefully each time you are implementing it on your landing pages, and to the extent that you can provide customers with an experience and use lazy loading to implement the JavaScript later and make sure the JavaScript isn't blocking the other elements on your page, you're going to make sure that your end customers have a way better experience. Next, I want to talk a little bit about custom fonts. So, of course, all companies have their brand, and font is a part of that brand. But we want to pay attention to where and when we use these custom fonts. 50% of mobile pages use them, and they require additional load time to load all the characters of those custom fonts and provide the experience that you are trying to create. So what I would advise is make sure that you are only using custom fonts when you think it is absolutely imperative, and make sure that you don't try to use multiple custom fonts on a page. Really think critically about where and when you want to implement these, and it'll help improve your site's load time. Next, I want to talk a little bit about redirects. Redirects, obviously just going from URL to URL and ultimately landing on the final mobile URL that your customers are going to experience. Each time you switch from URL to URL, you have one of these redirects, it is predictably going to increase the load time of your page. So again, similar to a bunch of these other potential fixes, let's make sure that we are using them smartly. If you are using a redirect to help gather analytics, that's okay. Just be sure that you're thinking about the cost of these redirects as you are thinking through your page's load time and ultimately your customer's user experience. And there are SEO tools available to help you ensure that you are minimizing the number of redirects, and we can provide those to you at Google. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about HTTPS requests. HTTPS is hugely important. We want to make sure that our customers are secure and that our data is secure as we are providing it to our end customers. But we want to make sure that we are implementing our HTTPS the right way. So if you check out sslabs.com, it's a great and free tool to help you make sure that you are setting up HTTPS in the correct way and that it is not going to weigh down your load time. So let's talk about the way to think about making a fast mobile site and how we think we can sort of visualize this and we can convey it to our advertisers. So there are really three things that I want to challenge everybody to pay attention to as they are thinking about making their website faster. The first of these is making sure that you give a good first impression. So, like I said, the goal of making a fast site isn't only objective speed, but how quickly customers perceive your site to be. This means that you can use lazy loading. You can load content above the fold first. The customer views the site as fast, and then load stuff below the fold after we're finished with some of the more crucial elements that are above the fold. We want to try to shoot for 3 seconds as a good benchmark to load content above the fold. Second, as I mentioned, these pesky requests, we want to make sure that we are keeping them manageable. So the goal for this is to get to below 80 requests for your landing pages. Again, the correlation is pretty clear. Fewer requests means faster loading time. And finally, I talked a little bit about page weight earlier. We want to make sure that we are dedicating our page weight to the things that matter and try to trim a lot of the fat that tends to creep in over time if we're not vigilant with maintaining our websites. So the goal for this is to try to keep the page at under 1 megabyte. That tends to be a pretty good thing to shoot for. And again, the lighter the page is, the faster your page is going to load, the happier your end consumers and end customers are going to be. And I like to sort of try out this metaphor as somebody who recently switched departments. Those 3 goals translate pretty well into moving. So your moving process is going to be a whole lot faster If you unpack the most important things first, that's content above the fold. You make fewer trips between your moving van and your new apartment, that is requests, and you want to make sure that the boxes are as light as possible so you don't throw out your back like I did. And that again translates to page weight and making sure that we're keeping our pages to below 1 megabyte. So let's talk about some concrete ways that we are going to fix the problem. There are 3. I'll go into each of them in depth, but broadly, we want to make sure that we are auditing and we are paying attention to the way that our page loads over time. And we have a number of tools that we can point you to. Second, we want to make sure that as we are designing our sites, that we are using data to justify all the decisions that we're making. And third, we want to explore AMP, or Accelerated Mobile Pages, as a solution to creating that fast and seamless experience that customers are expecting. So let's start with the audits and the way that we test our site and make sure that we are delivering that amazing experience. So one tool that we really like recommending is something called Test My Site. Test My Site lives at Think with Google, and it's a fairly simple tool. It is not particularly technical, so anybody can use it and appreciate it. And what you do is you throw in a URL, and it will test how quickly that site loads on a 3G network. You'll get a good estimate of how many customers you think are going to get left behind based on the load time. So like I said, customers are going to bounce for each incremental second that it takes for the page to load, which means that any incremental amount that we can reduce that load time by, we're going to be increasing the number of people who get to view our content. And so you also get the opportunity to see how you are comparing against some competitors, some industry benchmarks, and you can see how your site speed, frankly, stacks up. And you have the ability to download a report with customizable recommendations for the things that are specifically potentially going wrong with your site and the ways to fix it. Additionally, I want to make sure that we are using data for every design decision that we make and making sure that we are optimizing for the right things. So there are a whole bunch of reasons to make sure that the conversion flow is working out the way we think it is. So, for example, there's this stat on the left: 58% of advertisers are going to make sure that, like on quick sites, people are over half as likely to purchase on a fast site versus a slow site. And that sort of stands to reason. We understand as consumers of content that the longer it takes for a page to load, the less likely we are to make it through that conversion flow. Additionally, you can draw decisions based on the data that have to do with UX. So things like autofill are going to help improve the number of people who are making it through your conversion funnel. And as we're thinking about conversion funnel, I want to make sure that we are thinking about the full sort of engagement model. We generally think of, okay, top of the funnel, we're just trying to get customers in the door, and then as they go through that experience, we're going to guide them through the path ultimately to conversion. And we want to make sure that we're using speed through this as well. So using page analytics, you can get a good sense as to how many customers are dropping off at each point, and you can correlate that with how long it takes for each of these pages to load. So ultimately, you'll be able to guide customers through this experience, making sure that at every single step of the way, they're having a really good experience and that they are not getting frustrated and ultimately bouncing off the site, either abandoning their desired intent or hopping over to a competitor. And data is going to be the real key by which we keep ourselves honest and accountable about how end customers are consuming our experience. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about AMP. So accelerated mobile pages are a cool new technology that's been hopping around for the past couple of years. AMP is an open source technology that helps people build better websites that can load incredibly quickly. So if you build an AMP page correctly, you can have a page load not in the 7 or 10 seconds that some people on this call sites are loading, but in under a second. And the key to this is that AMP helps to optimize HTML and it invokes caching. So, like I said earlier in this presentation, you're going to see a different experience if you've gone to a site for the first time versus if you're a repeat visitor. And that's because repeat visitors get their content cached. And what AMP allows you to do is that Google will actually cache this content for you, and it will allow you to provide your end customers with that instantaneous experience the very first time that they show up on your website. And so the whole thing behind AMP is that we're trying to provide a super compelling experience to our end customers. And this has to do with near instantaneous loading that I had just mentioned, with making sure that scrolling is very smooth, that you're not going to have different elements popping up at different times and providing a little bit of a jumbled experience to your end customers. And also making sure that it is a fast and frictionless experience. Again, if you think back to that conversion funnel that I had just talked about, making sure that no one is dropping off at those top stages of the funnel is going to help increase the number of people who are converting towards the bottom of the funnel. And if you needed any more incentive, there are all sorts of distribution opportunities with not just Google, but with a whole host of partners, including Bing, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest. AMP is getting more and more heavily adopted, not just by advertisers, but also platforms are supporting it more and more often, which means that the amount of value you're going to be able to derive from it is only going to go up in the not too distant future. So, if I'm going to leave you with one thought, the goal of this presentation isn't to say, oh man, your site is in a lot of trouble, we need to do something, this is going to require a whole lot of work. It's just thinking about a really clear truth that I think we all know as consumers of digital content, and that is, the faster that a user gets to the landing page, the more people that you are going to ultimately reach with the message, with the web content that you've helped develop. All of this is just to try to get customers to engage with the content that you've spent so much time building. So, thank you very much for the time. I'm now going to transition over to a couple of questions that people have been sending in, things that people want answered. First question. I know that my load time is slow, but it's a tough sell to prioritize against a whole lot of other internal interests. And so the question is, how do I convince my superiors that this is something that needs to be prioritized? And I think that's a great question. So a lot of times we as members of sort of complex organizations are going to have trouble making our case that this mobile speed is the thing to prioritize. And I think the way that you do that is with data. So I mentioned making sure that you're leveraging analytics as you're helping to make this case. And actually, we did a study with SOSTA that says that for each incremental second of load time that you reduce a page by, so going from a load time of 3 seconds to 2 seconds, it can increase conversion rate by up to 27%. That is a decent amount of uplift, even by a 1 second reduction. So I think that the data exists out there to help make this case. Use your analytics, use Think with Google. These are all resources that are available to help you make the strongest case that this is something that needs to be prioritized against other projects that exist. Let's talk about testing AMP. Accelerated mobile pages, how do we test those for a page that we've created? It's another great question. So we are, the sort of goal of the test is to prove an AMP page is going to almost certainly load faster than a non-AMP page. And so what we recommend is you can either set up sort of a before and after test. So load your get some data on your non-amped page. If you've built an AMP page, then test some data against that. And that is going to hopefully help you prove the case that that AMP is a valuable solution. It's going to help improve conversion rate, reduce bounce rate, and ultimately is going to be the right solution for the rest of the website. Does AMP page guarantee less than 3 seconds? It's a great question as well. So like any page, there are ways that you can mess it up a little bit, but by and large, yes. The median AMP page is going to load in 0.75 seconds with caching. So I think, if my numbers are right, I think that 95% of AMP pages are going to load in under 3 seconds. So yeah, I think you can feel pretty confident that AMP is going to provide you that faster experience. Okay. A question from Julia about mobile speed scorecard and impact calculator. That's a great question. So I mentioned in terms of auditing tools, Test My Site, and that's the one that I spent the most time with. There are a number of other tools that you can use as well to help audit your page. So one of them is Lighthouse. Lighthouse lives in Chrome Developer Tools, and it's a good way to evaluate your site based not only on speed, but also on performance metrics, on how many of our best practices are you using, and it can help you see at sort of a frame-by-frame rate how your website is loading to a customer. So, for example, in some instances, you'll see, oh, wow, that's interesting. 60% of the content is loading after 3 seconds, but the other 40% is taking a while longer to load. So those are some insights that you can get from Lighthouse. The question is talking about speed scorecard and impact calculator. So also on Think with Google, we recently released this. It's a very handy tool. So it is using data from the Chrome User Experience Report, which is a collection of real load times that customers have experienced. And you can understand all of these these different load times averaged together is going to give you your number for the speed scorecard. So you can see how customers are actually experiencing your site, how long it takes to actually load across a variety of networks and from different countries, assuming that you're doing business across the globe. And that's an incredibly useful tool. Also on Think with Google is the impact calculator. So I mentioned before that speed is going to help improve conversion rate. It's going to help decrease bounce rate. And this impact calculator is going to help you quantify exactly how much. So what we're going to do is, using the impact calculator, you can input a whole bunch of metrics like average purchase size, conversion rate, number of visitors you're getting a month, and the impact calculator is going to spit out a number that is going to be cost savings, how much money you will save and how much impact these speed improvements are going to have as you take your site from its existing load time all the way down to as low as 1 second, which again is what we'd expect for you to experience by using an AMP page. So you can really help to quantify how big of an opportunity this is, both internally among your stakeholders and to your clients. If they're interested in pursuing this projects like improving their site speed, the impact calculator is a great way to help make that case. Great, couple more questions. Isn't AMP really for news sites or other sites with rapidly changing content? Bob, that is a great question. We hear that all the time. And so for a bit of context, AMP started off as a partnership between a bunch of tech companies, including Google and Twitter, and publishers. So it was a way to make news content and publisher content way faster. And ultimately that's worked, and that's a great use case. But over time, the functionality of AMP has increased such that it's going to work really well for advertisers as well. So for example, there are a whole bunch of e-commerce companies that are using AMP for product pages. There are lead gen customers who are using AMP for their key lead gen landing page. There are examples of all of this on ampproject.org and ampstart.com. So if you're interested in learning more about how AMP might be applicable for your advertisers, I think those are two great places to get started. All right, we'll do a couple more questions. Would you say that redesigning landing pages for mobile experience is an acceptable midterm solution for a site that it is converting on a lower rate of mobile as compared to desktop? Clients are often in denial, as you mentioned, or unwilling to allocate budget for an entire website overhaul. Julia, that's another great question. I think that we get that one a lot. And obviously, we are in resource-constrained situations all the time, and we need to be able to make we need to be able to prioritize where we think we're going to be able to implement these solutions. And so, what I would suggest is, let's look at our conversion funnel. Is there a point in time where we're seeing a lot of customers drop off? So in many cases, if we need to start somewhere, we start with the landing pages. So like I said, if we can increase the reach of the top of our funnel, it's going to have a lot of positive consequences down the road. So what I would suggest is let's try optimizing a landing page or two, and then running A/B tests against it. Let's see if it's actually converting better, if the bounce rate is actually going down. We feel pretty confident that that will be the case, but we want to make sure that our clients understand this as well, and hopefully that data is going to arm you to have the conversation around, all right, let's start with some pages, and then we can move towards optimizing the rest of the site. Great. Let's see. What SEO tool? What is the SEO tool you recommend to audit pages? That is sslabs.com. Another question about AMP that I think I covered. And I think that's about it. So again, thank you so much for the time, for listening to the importance of mobile site speed. Hopefully you can make some additional Academy on Air sessions. But till next time, thanks again. My name is Dane Seiden. Have a great day.